So to kick things off with quick intros, I'm Lisa Lavery with FoodSmart, and I'll be one of your webinar hosts today. I manage content and head up culinary development for our company. I live in San Francisco, as you can see behind me, with my husband, two preteen kids that are just trying to get through this school year after the holidays, and my snoring bulldog Moose that I just kicked out of my room. I've got quite a crew here. For those of you new to the FoodSmart community, we're a digital nutrition platform whose goal is to make eating well simple. We've got all kinds of exciting tools on our platform that help you all live more healthfully. And we will, oh, someone's demanding Moose. And we will definitely highlight them during your time with us today. So joining me, as you see, is one of my most favorite coworkers, Maddie Reeder.
Oh, well, you're too sweet, Lisa. And I also demand Moose always. He's wonderful. So if he wanders in everybody, you'll know it. He's great. But hi, everyone. My name is Maddie. I'm a registered dietitian by training, and I'm a clinical account consultant for FoodSmart. And I live in Raleigh, North Carolina with my fiance and our goofy pup Ghost, who may be running around behind me at some point. And she loves her plant-based meals and snacks just as much as Lisa and I do.
So Maddie and I are going to start off with our presentation, and then at the end, we'll get into answering the questions that you all submitted. And feel free to share them via the Q&A icon or the chat that I see you're lighting up right now at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many as we can during that section at the end. And if you have any general questions or need support, please use the chat also, as I see you guys are doing. Claire, another one of my favorite coworkers, is on the call, and she'll be happy to help you.
Great. So today we're going to discuss plant-based eating, and we'll start by giving a brief overview of plant-based nutrition and discuss how to get in the right mindset for a change in your diet.
And then from there, we'll discuss really easy building blocks for plant-based meals that you all can prep ahead of time at home and give you some inspiration and recipe ideas to add to your weekly menu plan. Our goal is to have a lively discussion. Some of our best ideas, like Maddie said, come during these webinars from you all. So don't hesitate to keep firing up the chat. And let's get started. Maddie, as an RD, do you get asked about this plant-based topic a lot?
Oh my goodness, definitely. And I find that this topic can be overwhelming to some of my patients, but it definitely doesn't have to be. Plant-based nutrition can be simple and can incorporate a lot of the things that you already cook, prep, and know. So we can't wait to share all of these tips and tricks that we have with you today.
All right, Maddie, before we dive in, I think it's always fun to see what our audience thinks about eating plants. Are you ready to do a poll?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Great way to start. All right, so everybody can see the poll up on your screen, but I'll read it off. During any given week, how often do you eat plant-based meals right now? And we'll give you all a couple of minutes to answer the question here. We see we're getting quite a split.
I think I fall in the salad for lunch category myself.
I would say the same. I'm a chronic salad for lunch eater, and that's how I make sure I get a lot of my vegetables in. I'm also a salad for breakfast eater, which I completely understand is not the norm, but I like savory foods in the morning, so that usually works out pretty well for me. So I think I fall in that category too.
Yeah, I'm a savory breakfast person myself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see I'm not alone in salad for breakfast. Thank you so much for making me feel a little bit more normal there. That's great.
So almost everybody has answered.
Great.
Give just a couple more seconds and then we can move on. But we've got quite a mix of responses. It really goes to show how differently we all eat from one another.
Yeah, it really does. And I even see in the chat here that some people are saying none of these apply to them because we do all eat so differently. And we all have our ways, often ones that we are very set in about how and what we eat. Whenever we're doing something new, in our diet or routines, I find that people react one of two ways. You are either excited by the change and the impact that it's going to have on your life, or you're overwhelmed by the shift in diet.
That's so true, Maddie. Sometimes I feel both excited and overwhelmed, regardless of how I feel when I start. Life always seems to step in and attack my plan of success. And when that happens, it can be a really crushing disappointment.
You're not alone in feeling that way, and I feel that way sometimes too. But as I remind our FoodSmart members, things happen. Maybe we have to travel or we get sick. Something comes up at your kid's school, our schedules change, and so on, just to name a few scenarios that make dietary changes really difficult. And when we hold ourselves to high or even impossible standards in our nutrition routine, you will face disappointment in yourself, often at no fault of your own. Our diet isn't meant to stay exactly the same all of the time. Our bodies are meant to have some changes, but sometimes it's hard to remember that. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time when we're so focused on just wanting to do things correctly.
Yeah, definitely. We all put so much pressure on ourselves when it comes to nutrition to do everything just perfectly.
We all do. And like I said, myself included, but I want to encourage you as we talk about plant-based eating today to get in a better and a different mindset about whatever goals you'd like to achieve with your health and your nutrition. Health isn't an all or nothing scenario. A tough week or even a few weeks, which is shocking, based on how hard we are on ourselves, but even that amount of time won't derail you in the long term. You can still be successful, learn a lot about yourself and your food preferences, and also reap the mental health rewards of eating well. So before we start, keep this in mind. Small changes make big differences when they become habits. And small hiccups in your diet spread out over long periods in the long period of your life are just drops in the bucket.
That's really good to know and to have in the back of our minds. Maddie, what else can we do to make changes in our diet to make them more manageable, both emotionally and physically, when we try something new?
That's a great question, Lisa. And I try to remember my 3 S's of dietary success when it comes to this category of thinking. So number 1 is support. And this is first because I find it to be the most important and the best indicator of whether somebody will be successful or not. Get your family on board, find a friend to try your new meal plan with, or find a registered dietitian to work with that will give you a hand to hold through this process. Having somebody to share success stories with and to gripe about trouble spots with makes all the difference. And like I said, people who have support are more likely to be successful. Then second component to my 3 S's is schedule. Make a schedule when you start. I encourage my members to allow some flexibility in their schedules to escape the feeling of rigidity. But by planning your meals and snacks ahead of time, that can make the process less daunting and overwhelming. And you can even plan your meals around certain staples to make it less overwhelming, like salad, like we mentioned earlier, or around certain events of the week. But that way, when you have a schedule, when things get chaotic, you don't have to put a lot of thought into what the entirety of your meal and your diet will look like. And the third one is silly, but it's smile. But I put this here because I like to remind my members that this should be something that makes you smile, that makes you happy. Pick recipes you love, get your kids involved, find recipes that you can share with your friend or coworkers, make an event out of it. Sometimes I'll say, dress up for dinner, make it fun, play games at the table, enjoy. And if you aren't enjoying this process even a little bit, then you might need to reevaluate your plan because you're more likely to find success when you aren't miserable through this whole process.
So helpful, Maddie. Nutrition is so important to our lives, but you can make it fun too. And we forget that sometimes when life gets crazy. So, any final tips before we really dive in, Maddie?
Yeah, my final recommendation before you start or make a shift in your diet is to be open to new ideas. And on the flip side, if you do try something and you are open to something new and you introduce something different in your diet or routine and it doesn't work for you, I encourage you not to write off the entire experience or the entire process. You may just need some different seasoning or a different cooking method. Maybe you need to add a side dish or something to make your meal feel really magical. And if a specific food food item, a recipe, or a method is an absolute no for you, that's okay too. Don't feel discouraged. There are so many options out there to choose from and to work with. And also, don't be afraid to ask for help too from a dietitian like myself. Maybe you can try a cooking class, reach out to others in an online forum, and of course, talk with your family, your friends, and your support system. So all that being said, Lisa, I think we can dive into the main course of our presentation.
Let's do it.
All right. So before we talk about types of plant-based eaters, I want to review the importance of adding plants to our diet.
Please do, Maddie. We all know fruits and vegetables are good for us. I see in the chat, some people are like, veggies, they just don't make me smile. So give us the full scoop of why we should incorporate these into our diet.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the honesty, and that's what we're here for, is to help with that. But generally speaking, plants contain high amounts of fiber and water, which is beneficial for a healthy heart and a healthy GI system, among many other bodily processes that can be helpful for that. Plant sources of protein are also lower in fat, if containing any fat at all, and they exclude all saturated fat in comparison to animal-based proteins, which can ultimately impact your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and other significant heart metrics in a positive way. And that will reduce your risk of heart attack or stroke in the long term. There's also significant research on plant-based nutrition decreasing the risk of other long-term diseases like diabetes and cancer. Now, there are many reasons that this is the case, but because fruits and vegetables contain high amounts of fiber, vitamins, minerals, and water, to name a few, they can fuel the body with the nutrients needed to maintain health and components to combine with other items consumed in the diet to remove excess, unnecessary fat from the body and maintain gut health, which we are seeing to have a high correlation with brain function and overall general health. So you combine all of those things together and you get one healthy, happy individual.
That is incredible. So one common misconception out there is that once you decide to go plant-based, that's it. It's all or nothing. So say sayonara to your steaks, your chicken, and salmon forever. So let's break it down. What are the different categories of plant-based eating and how can we tiptoe into it?
I love this question too. So when we say plant-based eating, what we mean is that you're consuming a diet that is mostly derived from plant sources. So think things that grow from the earth. There are all different ways we can break down what percentage of our diet includes plant-based items and that can be based on your personal preferences, your beliefs, and your medical needs. But a couple of common examples in how we can break down plant-based eating are on the screen here. First being semi-vegetarian or flexitarian, which this is the category that I find that I fall into the most. It includes eggs, your dairy foods, and occasionally meat, poultry, fish, and seafood. Then we have our pescatarians. That includes eggs, dairy food, fish, and seafood, but excludes meat or poultry. Vegetarians or lacto-ovo vegetarians include eggs and dairy foods in their diet, but have no meat, poultry, fish, or seafood in their diet. And then vegan, I think, is the one that's the buzzword, the name that we're the most familiar with these days. And that excludes all animal foods and beverages. But while we're going over these different titles and these examples of ways to eat plant-based, I encourage you not to get hung up on the names or the titles that are listed here.
That's an excellent point, Maddie. You don't have to be exactly one thing. And it goes back to how we started our discussion, which is the importance of being kind to yourself and starting where you can. You don't have to be a pescatarian, for example, to eat a plant-based diet that includes fish. You can wax and wane between the different categories. It's all about what makes the most sense for you and your family at that given time.
Yes, exactly. Well said, Lisa. It's one day and one meal at a time, right?
Exactly. That's how I approach every day, one meal at a time. So what are some nutrients we should look out for in our plant-based diet just to make sure that we're really getting nourished? Because animal-based proteins like your chicken, your fish, your beef, and pork are such a big staple of our diets. I know they were in mine. I grew up in the Midwest, and if there wasn't meat on the table and on your plate, it wasn't a true meal. So it can be hard for some people to imagine replacing that with a plant-based option.
Exactly. You're so right. And that's a great question, Lisa. When we swap our animal proteins and fats for another source, we want to ensure that we have a complete meal on our plates, which includes a carbohydrate source, a complete protein source, and a healthy fat option.
So now here's where I think people can really learn something exciting. This was interesting for me. Can you explain what you mean by a complete protein source?
Yeah, absolutely. So proteins are made up of building blocks called amino acids. And when you eat protein sources, those proteins break down and the amino acids break down further to play critical roles in your body. Protein is responsible for things like cell growth, repair, and maintenance, as well as many other specific processes like the synthesis of hormones and your neurotransmitters, just to name a few examples. In order for protein to play those roles, we need all of those amino acid building blocks, and some proteins don't contain them all in one source. Now, most animal proteins do, which is why they're the source of protein that we are the most aware of. However, there are several plant-based complete proteins, and there are many food combinations that create a complete protein source to fuel your body. And some are common, and you probably aren't even aware of it already. So this is some new information on protein and amino acids, but not all completely new information on proteins in general.
Great. That is so helpful, Maddie. Like I know from being a chef that if you take a bean source and a grain and a whole grain source, you can create a complete protein. So this is really, really helpful information.
Yeah, of course, that's what I'm here for. And we'll talk about some more specific combinations shortly. But before we do that, let's talk about some more of the basics. Getting started can be so daunting. So, Lisa, what are some of your favorite veggies to use in your plant-based meal plan?
Oh, there's so many to choose from, Maddie. I always like to let the season act as my guide and then choose my meal based on what kind of cuisine I'm in the mood for and my family and how much time I have to make a meal. So sometimes I want something with a big punch of flavor and I have zero time to prep. So I lean on Asian flavors. But if I'm just chilling on a weekend, I might have time to turn on the oven and slow roast some veggies or simmer a comforting stew. Summer means the char of the grill for some flavor. You get the picture.
That's a great and very chefy way to look at meal prep, Lisa. I love it. Can you give some other examples of how to get the most out of our produce choices? Sometimes I feel like I get stuck in a rut with how I cook my produce. It's the same thing again and again.
Sure. I love to go to the farmer's market when I can, but I really lean on these vegetables that are pictured here. They're available at most grocery stores, and they're my go-to veggies that I rotate definitely throughout our meal plan. So any tuber sweet potatoes are especially chock full of vitamins and minerals. I really love to do small potatoes, and I lean on roasting. You get that nice caramelized texture and the browning, and it really intensifies the flavor. Leafy greens like kale and Swiss chard are great for chopping into salads, and I'll put a little bit of salt and olive oil on them and give them a good massage and then add a dressing, or you can saute them. Heads of broccoli, and in my home, if we're not eating broccolini, I'm probably not cooking. They're so flavorful and can be used in so many different recipes. Again, I gravitate towards a quick roast to get those crispy bits, or I'll do a stovetop saute with some garlic and a little squeeze of citrus at the end. And broccoli and broccolini are really great for stir frying because the florets at the end really soak up all that great flavor. Mushrooms are another go-to in my plant-based meal planning. They give a rich umami flavor that can mimic your favorite cut of meat when you roast them or saute them. You can even chop them up or blitz them in a food processor to mimic ground beef in chilies, soups, and stews. And my main tip when cooking mushrooms, I have two of them actually, are not to crowd the pan because the moisture as it's released, they will steam the mushrooms instead of browning. And that's what you want, is that really great brown caramelized flavor. And then I don't salt them until the end of the cooking process to allow them to really crisp up and reduce and intensify the flavor without getting tough and chewy. In-season tomatoes can add bright acidity when they're chopped fresh, or I'll take the little cherry tomatoes and slow roast them for sauces and soups. We always have avocados on hand. I'm a big avocado toast person in the morning, but they can be added to salads, stuffed into sandwiches and wraps. And we even blend them into smoothies in the morning to get that great thick texture without adding the sugar that bananas can sometimes. Apples can be eaten out of hand. They're also wonderful to simmer into curries and soups. And just this morning, I grated an apple and put it over some oats and yogurt. You can also dice them into salads. They give that great sweet counterpoint to anything salty you're having. And cabbage can be roasted, braised, or shredded. Roasted, like I talked about in the recipe earlier. And watermelon is a great hydrating snack. In addition to just being eaten out of hand, it can be tossed with some feta, olives, and herbs for a salad, or even blended and strained to make a refreshing agua fresca.
Those are some super helpful tips, Lisa. Thank you. And as a dietitian, I need to make a plug for sprinkling on some nuts and some seeds to add crunch, texture, fiber, and heart healthy fats to any of the meal ideas that you mentioned.
Yeah, I love that tip. They also make your completed dish look pretty, and they give people who are eating your food an idea of the flavors that will be inside. Maddie, do you have any fun options for incorporating whole grains besides the standard call out for steamed brown rice?
Oh my goodness, yes. I know when my family was starting to add more plants to their diet, they were so sick of brown rice. So I have a lot of examples here. So vegetable-based alternatives like white rice, which is I'm using air quotes, rice made from vegetables that you can find in the grocery store, are a hearty way to add grains. Then you have things like farro, which is a high protein, high fiber grain, which is nutty and chewy and adds a really great texture. Then our superfood quinoa is a complete protein in and of itself, which is great. And it actually isn't just a side option for your dinner meals. You can actually add quinoa to breakfast bowls, like your oatmeal, and also to salads at lunch, just to name a few ways that you can incorporate it that are unique. And all varieties of lentils are a foolproof way to add protein, bulk, and flavor to a meal. And you can even pack them into things like meatballs and veggie burgers to add some protein. On the bean side, having a few canned varieties available like black beans, pinto, and cannellini make weeknight meals really easy to prep for.
Yeah, I always have a variety of canned beans, and they're just a super easy way. I did it last night to add some protein to a pasta salad or as a side dish. These are great suggestions. And I have to give a plug for the white rice. They even have flavors now. The texture is great and it's so easy to prepare. And speaking of prep, I find that if I spend a little bit of time during quieter moments in my kitchen, roasting up some veggies, steaming some of these grains, and incorporating into these tips, plant-based meals come together much easier than cooking a traditional protein. I think of this prep as building blocks for making many different kinds of meals throughout the day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
So sort of like a choose your own adventure kind of meal planning. I really like that. Lisa, can you give a few examples of what you make to combine into meals?
Sure. And I can share a few recipe ideas too. So when I'm planning out my plant-focused meals, I like to think in three different categories: the grains, the main protein, and the vegetables. So for my grains, I like to use what's called the pasta method. I don't have time and the patience to measure out a specific amount of water and babysit a simmering pot and some steaming grains. So I just bring a big pot of salted water to a boil. And I find that about 1 cup of any grain works for my family of 4 with a little bit of room for leftovers to put in grain bowls or for breakfast throughout the week. And this water can also do double duty if you want to blend some veggies to cook for adding to my meals later. Items like my favorite broccoli, asparagus, and peas are perfect for this type of flash cooking. And once the grains are cooked, I rinse them under cold water so it stops the cooking process and releases some of that starch. And then I spread them out on a baking sheet to cool so they don't get clumped together. Then they're ready to be stored in the fridge or put in a Ziploc bag to put in the freezer.
That sounds pretty easy, Lisa. And honestly, that's something that many people forget that you can do is prep your grains ahead of time in a way that allows them to be used as leftovers that's still tasty and has a really good mouthfeel. And if you're not blanching veggies, Lisa, how else do you like to cook them?
Great question. And I think you guys all probably know by now, my favorite and the easiest way to cook veggies for me is to roast them. So I'll just turn my oven on right when I get down to the kitchen. I put it at about 425 degrees Fahrenheit. That's great for most veggies. And I cut up some sturdy vegetables. You know, your squashes will do great. Your cabbage will do great. And then toss them in olive oil on a sheet pan. So this is the perfect opportunity to add some spice and heat to, I was saying before, what kind of cuisine am I interested in? Okay, if I'm interested in having something with Southwestern flavor, I can add cumin and cayenne and red pepper flake, chili powder. They're all really great spices to season vegetables with. And with this method, I can also toss in a can of beans about halfway through the cooking time. So I'll push some of the veggies over to one side, toss the beans in there, and that will get them crisped up and infuse them with the spiced oil that's already behind on the sheet.
That's an awesome tip, Lisa. And as you mentioned a little bit ago, this is actually a lot less stressful, I think, for me and my loved ones than making an animal-based protein is. So this is something that's a really great and useful tip. And then if you add beans to the mix, like you said, you've got a complete protein for all of your meals then.
Yep, definitely. And speaking of protein, we all know tofu. It's another great candidate for roasting. It crisps up and you can brush on a glaze, like a soy glaze, that will reduce in the heat of the oven, even barbecue sauce. I kind of think of tofu as like plant-based chicken. It takes to flavors really easily. And then you can get it to caramelize onto the tofu for more flavor. So Maddie, we've talked about from a chef lens, from an RD lens, any other great protein sources that you can get from plants besides tofu and the bean grain combo?
Yeah, there are some really great protein sources from plants that are available. I think oftentimes when we think of plant-based nutrition, we think of tofu first, but there are so many other really wonderful options that you can mix into your weekly meals. So some other great protein sources include a few things that we mentioned prior, like quinoa and lentils. A few other options include chia seeds, which you can add to smoothies. You can add to oatmeal. That's personally one of my favorite ways to use chia seeds. You can add them onto salads too. That's another way I love to use them, or in my dressings. Oats are another great source of protein. Oats, like you use for oatmeal, for your baking recipes. You can use them even in salads. So many great ways to use oats. And pea protein, that's another one that I'll use in smoothies. I'll mix it into, depending on what flavor pea protein I get or find, I can mix that into my oatmeals or my breakfast cereals. And then another one that I use more with my savory foods is nutritional yeast. So that has a nice cheesy flavor, and you can incorporate that into your lunch and dinner meals to give you that same type of feel, same type of flavor, but a plant-based option. There's some good amounts of protein in there. With nutritional yeast, I always make sure you look at your serving size so that you're getting enough for it to be an adequate amount of protein, but not too much. Spelt is another grain option that you can use that is high in protein, and seitan is a soy-based protein that many plant-based diets include.
Yeah, I see somebody else just called out nutritional yeast on popcorn is delicious. We do Friday night movies most Fridays here at the house, and we put nooch, as we call it, on our popcorn, and my kids love it. I also see a lot of people calling out hemp seeds and hemp hearts. Amazing. And another fun fact about hemp seeds is that you can add them to dressings to thicken them without oil. So if your dressing is a little bit loose, maybe you've added a little bit too much vinegar, and I'll make mine in a blender or just use a hand blender in a Tupperware container. Toss in a sprinkling of hemp seeds and let them soak up the liquid a bit, and then buzz them, and your dressing is instantly thicker. So that's another fun fact.
That's awesome.
And then I'd love to give you a few recipe options that we use in our house for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So breakfast ideas, I just had this morning. I have some muesli with some berries, nuts, and cinnamon. Grate a little bit of apple. You can put some oat milk in there. Almond berry granola is great. My favorite, avocado toast. And if you're going for that lacto-ovo plant-based thing, you can put a jammy egg on top, and that will keep you definitely full until lunch. Breakfast burrito wraps are great for grab and go when your kids are running late for school. They can eat it in the car on the way. Whole wheat English muffins with almond butter, sun butter, regular peanut butter, and bananas are great. And quinoa or chia pudding are another great way to start the day. For lunch, salad for lunch, make it a seasonal salad, add some beans and some grains in there. You've got almost a crossover grain bowl. Veggie soups, butternut squash soup is wonderful in season right now. And then when you're thinking of curries, lean on chickpeas. Do a chickpea and veggie curry instead of adding your chicken in there. Veggie flatbread or pizza is great. You can do a whole wheat crust and add any of those roasted vegetables that you had, or a grain bowl with roasted veggies. Use those choose your own adventure components, and you can pack that up to eat on the go. Some great dinner ideas. Maddie's favorite, one of my favorites, Super Bowl's coming up. Do a vegetarian chili. You can even set out all the topping bars so people can put on what they want. Another fun fact is the Super Bowl is the day before Valentine's Day. So that could be amazing or not amazing, depending on if your team is in the Super Bowl. Kebabs with grilled chicken. If you're doing a little bit of protein, you can also swap it in for tofu if you want. Whole wheat pasta with seasonal veggies. Again, toss in some beans there for some extra protein. And then grain bowls are great for really breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa. You're making me hungry as always. Well, as we wrap up, we want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions today, just because this was such an interesting topic to so many of you. But we want to take a few minutes to highlight how FoodSmart can help support you now and simplify your healthy eating, plant-based efforts this year.
Yep. So first, let's chat about our amazing team of registered dietitians, of which you are a part of, Maddie.
All right. So our registered dietitians are experts in all things nutrition related. We work with you and create a plan that is customized to your lifestyle and your goals. So whether you're trying to manage your weight, treat a chronic condition, discuss or work through an emotional relationship with food, or find healthy dinner options in a sea of misinformation, our registered dietitians can support you. And registered dietitian appointments may be included in your health plan's offering free of charge. And you can click the link that Claire will put in the chat box to get scheduled with an RD at FoodSmart today.
Yeah, booking an appointment can have such a positive impact on you and your family's health goals. And let's face it, this time of year, everyone could use another member on their team to help keep them on track. So next, let's talk about a few of the other useful tools that are available to you on the FoodSmart platform. So FoodSmart's meal planning tool is one of my favorites and makes it super simple to incorporate all the tips we talked about today. There's healthy recipes for everyone in your family. So we have a huge database of recipes that I help curate that span every cuisine and flavor preference. There's even lists for recipes that can be made in 30 minutes or less, vegetarian options, budget-friendly options, because we're all looking to stretch our grocery budget. There's even an in-app master meal list. So once you start making meals with FoodSmart, you can heart the recipes that your family gives the thumbs up to create your own personal cookbook in the app. And using those recipes, you can generate a weekly plant-based meal plan in a matter of minutes to reference for meals throughout the week.
We also integrate with Walmart, Amazon Fresh, and Instacart for quick and contactless grocery shopping if you're trying to avoid and limit trips to the store during this busy time of year. When you create a meal plan in the app, FoodSmart will generate a shopping list of the foods you'll need that can then be added to your shopping cart with just a few taps of your finger. So that means that your days of writing a grocery list and losing it or forgetting it at home, like I usually do, are long gone. And you can even compare prices across these platforms to find the best deals for you and your family at stores nearest to you.
And you can even invite other household members to the family meal plan with you. Then everybody can share in viewing the week's meal plan. So no more, what's for dinner? What are we having? They can share their favorites and even help with online grocery lists and tackle food shopping as a team. We keep members engaged and forming new healthy eating habits through our newsletters, blog posts, and webinars like the one you're joining right now to create a strong network of tools to drive healthier eating decisions. And everything's created by our in-house medical registered dietitian and nutrition team. All right, I think we have time for some questions. I know I saw a ton coming in on the chat, and we have some in Q&A. Maddie, where should we start?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love to see all of these questions. We can give you a lot of the wisdom and knowledge that we have from our experience, not only in the healthcare space, but in Lisa's experience in culinary science, but really hearing from you all and the experiences that you're having in your lives is so important too. So we wanted to make sure with this topic, we left lots of time for you to ask your questions. So we'll get to as many as we can here today. One of the questions that I saw that I can start with, Lisa, is why didn't we mention nuts as part of the list of options for protein sources? So nuts can have a good amount of protein, and they're one that I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with. We think of what has high amounts of protein. A lot of people think of peanut butter. And while they do have a good amount of protein in them, the volume that you have to eat to get that amount of protein can sometimes be really high. So great to have them in your meal to sprinkle on your salads or to have for a snack paired with some fruit or some veggies. But just make sure that you watch your portion size of your nuts and seeds, just because of, they have that protein, but they also can be high in your healthy fats, but still high in fats and therefore really high in calories too. So just looking at what your overall goals are is important when you're thinking about incorporating those nuts and seeds, and not just looking at it as one category of food, since it falls into a couple different categories.
Great. And then I've got one here that I'll answer live. How do you roast vegetables? Great question. So 425 degrees Fahrenheit is what I usually set my oven to. Make sure that my racks are arranged so that I can put the baking sheet in the middle. Two schools of thought here. You can either put the baking sheet in the oven to heat up as you're chopping your vegetables. That creates a really hot surface. So when you toss your cut veggies with your olive oil and your seasonings and you pour it onto the pan, you'll hear that nice sizzle. That really promotes browning and promotes the cooking. And then I usually try to put my vegetables with some tongs cut side down. Generally, I use olive oil for roasting. I would say someone else asked about different oils. I would say I reach for olive oil 90% of the time when I'm cooking. It can withstand a decent amount of heat. If I'm doing super high heat cooking, like a stir fry, then I can reach for like a canola or an avocado oil, something that has a higher smoke point. But generally olive oil works. And then I save my flavored oils for seasoning at the end. So your sesame oil, any of your like hazelnut infused oil, those oils I keep to the end because they impart flavor and they will burn if you cook with them. So, and then when you're roasting veggies, I just kind of take a peek, like about 15 minutes in, take a look. Is it getting brown? Is it the consistency that I want? If not, I'll just give it a toss and then throw it back in. That's a big chef tip, is to just try your food. Like, if you don't think it's done, give it a try. If you want it to be a little bit more reduced or a little bit softer, just toss it back into the oven.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. It's always so helpful to hear those tips from you. So I have a couple of questions that are similar. So I'll read one and then I'll kind of answer a few questions at once. So somebody said, my body doesn't seem to adjust well to eating leafy greens and certain vegetables very well. There's bloating, your stomach feels upset, gassy, and so on. So what's going on there, and what suggestions do we have to help combat that? So when your body breaks down your plant-based items, so your fruits and your vegetables in whatever form that they're in, your body has certain enzymes which break down those different food items. If it's not something that you're eating all of the time regularly, right, then your body doesn't have a whole lot of those enzymes available to help you break down those foods. But the more you eat them, the more your body will build up those enzymes so that they can break everything down in your stomach and tolerate it a lot better. So oftentimes when I have somebody incorporating more fruits and vegetables into their diet, I will recommend that they do so slowly. Try a couple of different things spaced out over a week, see what goes well. And then if it seems to upset your stomach, you can cut back a little bit and just add it slowly over time. I wish there was a magic answer for everyone that's, here's the formula of when you should add broccoli in, and then when you add apples, and then when you can go ahead and add celery, but everyone's body is so different. So really, instead of writing off different categories or different types of fruits and vegetables as something that doesn't work for you, maybe just try tapering it back a little bit and then adding it in a little more slowly. That can help a lot with the stomach upset, gas, and bloating. and so on. So sometimes it just takes your body a little bit to adjust, just like when you're trying anything new. And I always will equate it back to, if you go out and you eat a weekend full of pizza, if you ate pizza every day all weekend, your body wouldn't feel great either. We just expect that a little bit more. We just understand why that would happen. And it's because your body's not used to eating that much pizza. It's the same when you add your vegetables back, and your body just needs some time to adjust.
That's really great. So you're basically like training your body to learn how to break down veggies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's really important when you're trying to get your family involved too, especially if you have small children and they're not quite sure how they feel about vegetables and fruits yet, just to start really small and start with a couple of things. Start with things that you know you like and you know you tolerate well, and then add some new things in as time goes on, and just see what works and what doesn't work for you. You'll be surprised how much your body can tolerate, and then how much better you'll actually feel on the other side of everything once you've gotten used to a certain fruit, vegetable, or an entire, category of food there.
Yeah. And it's all in the way you cook things too. I like to use Brussels sprouts as an example. So Brussels sprouts had a horrible rap, right? Because people would boil them and they'd be mushy and they had lost all of their flavor and their Brussels sproutiness. But now Brussels sprouts are really, really everywhere. They're super popular, and it's all just because people went, okay, so this cooking method doesn't work for this type of vegetable. But if you roast it and get it nice and brown and then toss it with some really great herbs and a little bit of a sprinkling of Parmesan and some toasted almonds, well, that's really delicious. So just playing around with the way things are prepared too. You might not like it one way, but like it another way. So, and in the same vein of preparation, I have a question here. What are the best ways to use, one, a pressure cooker, and two, air fryers for recipes? I was just talking about air fryers yesterday. I need to get my hands on one of these, but I'll start with pressure cookers. So I use my pressure cooker Instant Pot for things that I know take a really long time, but I don't have that much time. So beans are a great example. Dried beans are really economical, and if you buy them dried, you have the opportunity to add flavor to them and make sure that you're controlling the amount of salt that's in your beans. But you have to soak them, and then you have to rinse them, and then they take a while to cook on the stovetop. So pressure cookers are great for things like that. Also really great to make rice, and you can make perfect jammy eggs in a pressure cooker in no time at all. They're traditionally used for tougher cuts of protein, tougher cuts of animal protein, because the pressure melts the fat away, and so you get really great flavor. So if you're going to be making animal protein, not the forum so much for this topic of conversation, but they're also great for that. And then air fryers are great for when you want to have something crispy. Again, Super Bowl's coming up. We all love those crispy wings. Making something crispy without adding a lot of oil. And essentially, air fryers are a convection way of cooking food. So the air is just circulating all around. So the heat is really bathing what you're cooking. It's getting bathed in hot air all the way around. So air fryers are great for crisping up things that traditionally would be put into a deep fryer and not so great for us.
Great. Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Oh, I see a lot of questions on our thoughts on the Impossible or Beyond Meat. And this is a great question. So when I was drinking my first cup of coffee this morning, I was just flipping through channels, and I saw that Kentucky Fried Chicken has their own Beyond Chicken. They are claiming they're the first ones to develop this special kind of Beyond Chicken that's exactly like the real thing. So there are so many options out there. You've got your meatless meatballs and all your prepackaged items, and those can be really great in a pinch, and a lot of people really love them. It's a great way for people to kind of dip their toe into plant-based eating, and really, I think it opens a lot of people's eyes to, wow, there's great ways you can cook plants if you can be a little bit creative and willing to try something new. What I caution you on is make sure that when you are purchasing those items for your home that you check on the ingredients. Oftentimes, because they are processed, which isn't always a bad thing, but because they're processed, they can be really high in sodium and excess fats and some other additives so that it holds all of those plants together. It acts like an emulsifier. So just check your nutrition label, and that should tell you most of what you need to know. See what the total amount of protein is. If it's really low in protein, it's probably just really great creative advertising that's making you feel like it's a 1-for-1 substitute, one meatball for another, and it's not always that way. So check for your content of protein, check for your sodium, and check for, the amount of fat and what type of fat is added in there. And then that's how you can make your decision. Again, it's not something that I have a solid recommendation on that's standard for everybody. Everyone's going to have different uses and needs when it comes to certain food types and food products. But looking at your label is a really great place to start if that's something that you're thinking about.
Yep. And you guys are registered dietitians are really great at helping to decipher labels, like what the mystery of what it is. So thank you so much for that. So I've got one here, tips when attending parties. We're in a little bit of a lull. We've had all of our parties, but they'll be coming back again. So this person's family is plant-based, and while their friends are not. And whenever they go to their houses, there's barely anything to eat. Yeah, this happens. What I say is if you can bring something that your family can eat. If you guys have a really great plant-based dip that you like to eat, bring that with some cut veggies, or even some pita chips. And then also eat a little bit before you go if you know that you're going to a carnivore lovers party, or if it's a party that traditionally has heavier foods like a summer barbecue. And then look for side dishes. Like normally some sides will be more plant forward. So you can make a full meal. I mean, Thanksgiving is all about the sides. So just really trying to decipher what there is in side dishes and make a plate out of that.
That's great. Another question I'm seeing a handful of times is, how do you resist craving carbs when you are changing to a more plant-based diet? And this is actually a great question because there's a couple of reasons that your body is probably craving carbs when you switch your diet. First may be that you've cut back on something you're very used to eating and that's comforting and enjoyable to you. So you're missing that. That's a completely normal and appropriate response to changing your diet from an emotional standpoint. But if you find that you're craving carbs a lot when you have switched to a more plant-based diet, you might actually be lacking them, and your body is feeling hunger and that needs that energy. And that's part of why you're craving it. So that doesn't mean that you have to go and eat a whole bag of hamburger or hot dog rolls to make up for it. But there are some really creative ways that we can add some carbs back into your diet in ways that you enjoy, that help you meet your health goals as well. So sometimes looking at your portion size of your rice or of whatever grain you have utilized is a good thing, a good place to start. Sometimes people cut that and make that portion really small because they really want to monitor the carb. But if it's acting as your carb and your protein, because some foods do double duty, they can be both. But if you're using that as your carb and your protein and your portion size is small, you may need to increase that a little bit. You also may need to look at your diet in a whole day standpoint. So not just looking at each meal, but what are you eating between meals? Has that changed? Have you cut out a carb then and you're only eating maybe a protein snack? The protein won't fill you up exactly the way that a carbohydrate will. So I always recommend when you look at your meals and your snacks, try to make them complete, meaning they have some source of a carb, some source of a protein, and some source of a fat. And to get exact details on, well, exactly how much should I need for my weight and my goals and the medications I'm on and so on, best person to ask that to would be a registered dietitian. So that way it can get really specific, but it doesn't have to be that daunting. You really can just think of carb, protein, fat for all of your meals and snacks and make sure that you're getting enough. It's a great place to start when you're craving those carbs.
Great answer. Okay, so we've got one here. Any prep tips for cutting up butternut squash, rutabagas, and unwieldy vegetables? I was just talking about this with Claire yesterday. So when you're cutting a vegetable that doesn't like to behave on the cutting board, like a butternut squash, I always tell people to create a flat surface first. So we'll take butternut squash as an example. You can peel the outside and there's a bulb end and then the longer neck end. So I always like to cut off the bulb end first, and then I'll cut the neck in half so that I have a really nice flat surface. If something's rolling all over the place, it's really hard to cut it and you could end up injuring yourself. So just take a look at the vegetable and try to find a cut surface. Cut through this equator of a round vegetable and plop the flat side on a cutting board, and then you can cut it into planks and then sticks. And then my last tip for cutting up vegetables is think about how you're going to eat it. You know, there's so many different ways to cut a vegetable, little bite-sized pieces, and then just make sure that all of the cut pieces are of uniform size so that they're done at the same time. If you have a big piece and a little piece, the little piece might be mushy or burned before the larger piece cooks. So just take a general peek and say, okay, all of these are of similar size and they're bite size, and you should have no issues.
Great. Another question I can answer quickly is, I've seen a few times, is for individuals who are on blood thinners and they have to look at what the amount of their vitamin K intake looks like so that it doesn't interfere, so you don't have that food and drug. What vegetable options, what protein options are available to them? So what foods are low in vitamin K? So foods that are high, we think immediately of our green leafy vegetables. Those are high in vitamin K. So if you are on a blood thinner, we want to avoid those. But foods that you can go towards and try in your diet are things like squash, eggplant, your tomatoes, mushrooms, your sweet potatoes more than your regular potatoes. Things like cucumbers, that's something that's sometimes I have people ask me, I want to eat something green. What can I eat that's green? Cucumbers are great. And then when we look at our fruits, things like strawberries, apples, peaches, watermelon, bananas, those are low in vitamin K in comparison to other options out there. And just look at how you're spacing those things throughout your day as well. That's important. So make sure your fruits and veggies are spaced throughout your day. You're not getting them all at one time, and that will help with your blood thinners as well. Always, my caveat is always make sure you check with your doctor and your dietitian, but generally speaking, those are some things that are low in vitamin K.
I think we have time for one more, and I'd like to answer if that's all right with you. And then I want to share the poll results with everybody before we convene for the day. So I need more variety. It's either just veggies or veggies with pasta. Any suggestions for variety? Yep, I get you there. When you look at the vegetarian options at any restaurant, veggie pasta is the good old primavera is usually on there. For variety, I suggest branching out and looking at different types of vegetables. If you have a farmer's market next to you, poke around and see what's there. And then you can create so many different flavors by leaning on your pantry. So take a look at what you've got in there. You know, your spices, like I talked about earlier, and then you can look in the fresh herb section in your refrigerator to see what you have. If my herbs are looking a little bit peaked, I like to blend them into a sauce. So like a really great chimichurri sauce, I'll add some parsley and cilantro, some garlic, and a little bit of oil and some sherry vinegar. So you can add a sauce to your vegetables. Soy sauce is a really great option. And then adding some crunch too. So any of those nuts and seeds, if you like those, toasted almond slices are one of my favorites. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, pepitas are great. So just really playing around with the flavor profile of a similar veggie. You know, you can do butternut squash is a great example. During the holidays, it's roasted and put into soups, and so it has a very French-based flavor profile. But then you can also simmer it into either a Thai curry or an Indian curry, and it will really lend itself to those flavors too. So just playing around with the spices and oils and herbs and everything you have in your pantry is super helpful and keeps it exciting and interesting. All right, shall we take a look at our poll results?
Yes, I think we should.
All right, can everybody see? So salad for lunch, pretty clear winner.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have meatless Mondays, pretty well split though.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from you on this, Maddie?
I just love to see different ways that people eat. No matter where you are today, you can always make changes, and those changes don't have to be, hard and fast rules. You can always oscillate between being a carnivore and being a plant-based eater. So I encourage you to try some different things, try some options that we have suggested here and that Lisa's walked you through. There are so many ways that you can incorporate more plants into your diet for a healthier lifestyle.
And I applaud the carnivores for coming to a plant-based eating made easy webinar. That's the first step. And I love that your call out that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, you can still have your meat a couple days a week, and it doesn't have to be meatless Mondays. It can be meatless Wednesdays or meatless Thursdays. So I really, really like the diversity here in our poll.
Great.
Anything else you'd like to add? Any closing remarks before we let everybody go about their day?
No, just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining, and thank you for being such active participants. These types of webinars that we do are best when we have everybody giving their thoughts and sharing their ideas with others. I think that is so important when it comes to good nutrition, is having good support, as I mentioned, with your 3 S's. And good support isn't just your family and friends, it is wonderful people like you all. So thank you so much for being here. This was great. And we hope to see you on our next webinar soon.
Yes, and I want to close by saying I know a lot of people have asked. We will be sending anyone who registered for the webinar. So whether you were able to attend or your friend wasn't able to attend, as long as you register for the webinar, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link for you to watch this full recording on demand and a copy of the slide deck. So be looking for that in your inbox probably on Friday. And just again, want to reiterate what Maddie said. Thank you all so much. Taking an hour out of your day is a big time commitment. So we appreciate you guys being here, and we look forward to seeing you next quarter at our next webinar. Have a great day, everybody.